Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another CSRM podcast. And I'm joined with a long-time friend, Tim Tucker. Tim, welcome to this podcast.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be here. Good to be with you today.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Here we are. You started in the UK. I started in the US. You've moved to South Africa, and there's been a lot that's gone on. I just have to say that one of the phenomenal times that we connected is when your wife, and a couple of kids, of which the family has now grown beyond that in more ways than one. But you just reminded me of something that I'd forgotten about, and that your son, Caleb, he's going to hate to hear this right now, who is now approaching his 20s, was playing Legos in my basement, kind of in our rec room or whatever, and you guys spent some time with us, and he rode the horse we had there, and we had some wonderful times together.
Yeah, it's almost. I mean, that's 16 odd years ago now, Greg, and it was a great time. I just remember we were driving, and we were touring in the States and doing sports ministry and visiting churches and friends, and my son, I mean, he was 2, turning 3, I think, and we'd been spending so long in cars that all he wanted to do was arrive at someone's house. And he kept asking us, and we'd never been to your house, he kept asking us, will there be a basement there? Will there be Lego? Will there be toys? So the first thing we had to do when we arrived at your house was raid your basement and just see if there were some toys to appease this youngster who'd been suffering in the back of the car for so many hours.
Well, it was a wonderful time, and we formed a wonderful friendship. It got started actually because of your father, and I know that he has been involved in sports ministry. Just give us a brief update of that and the sports ministry heritage that you have there.
Sure. I mean, my dad in the 90s, early 90s, felt this tug in his heart and call to sports ministry. He'd been a teacher, passionate about sports, his whole life. Became a Christian at university, married my mum, had us, was a teacher, high school teacher. But in the early 90s, got involved with Christians in sports in the UK and running outreach events. I remember working with him on some five-a-side tournaments in my teens, and eventually felt the call to go into full-time sports ministry. 94, I think it was 94, 95, left teaching and joined Ambassadors in Sports, which was then a group of missionaries working out of Bolton in England. And within 5 or 6 years, he took the lead of that work there in the UK. And and it was a privilege for me. By the time I actually spent about 12 years with Ambassadors in Sport, by that time I was in Cape Town, South Africa. So I've been able to work with my dad, Ray Tucker, over those years. And then about 6-7 years ago, he retired. But is still active in missions. He goes on a missions trip to Moldova once a year, has been supporting others in sports ministry in different countries as well. So yeah, that's part of a great heritage. And I remember some fun times in various places in Zimbabwe and other places, sharing a football field with my dad, who was, I guess, approaching 60, and myself sharing a field and still enjoying being actively involved in sports together.
Well, it's hard for some of us to believe those times have come and gone, and now ambassadors in football. If those of you that don't know that the lineage that Ambassadors in Sport has now moved their name to Ambassadors in Football, but it's still a great group of people. And of course, the Christians in Sport has been, in some ways, the great grandpappies, we might say, of a lot of things that have gone on in England. And I think that's where we did first cross paths because of some of the things that CSRM and CIS had gotten involved in. And Ray, I know you probably will watch this at some point and just know how fond my heart is towards you. And Tim, your dad was one of the best that I've ever come across. And his spirit, his heart, his modeling of the faith in every area of life.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Just personal integrity and family and everything. He was a real model for us. And so we just give God praise and thanks for all those people that have helped us get going. But you then moved, as you said, to South Africa, and you were with Ambassadors, but you have kind of transitioned to something else. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was with Ambassadors 2001 to 2013. Started here in Cape Town, South Africa, spent time, then moved up to Pretoria and oversaw the work of Ambassadors into a number of countries, into Africa specifically. My portfolio was new developments across Africa. And then as happens, the season came to an end and I had a transition. And I now work for a ministry called the Message Trust. Again, having strong connections to the UK, an organization that's grown out of Manchester in England, but with a real passion to reach youth at risk, the hardest to reach young people. We're gospel-centric, bold proclamation of the gospel alongside long-term church-based discipleship, seeking to create an environment where young people can find Christ, communicated to them in language they can understand, but then be connected to churches where they can be effectively discipled long-term. So the last 8 years, we've been developing that here in Cape Town, South Africa, in working in prisons, tough communities infested with gang activity, poverty, crime, and again, seeking to develop and work alongside churches to help them engage with youth at risk in effective ways. And the joy for us is really when we see young people that everyone else has written off come to Christ, become engaged in an environment where they can be discipled, and then they themselves become transformational leaders. And within the message, we call that urban heroes, that someone becomes a young person that everyone else has written off, becomes an urban hero, a transformational leader, able to use their gifts and passions in service of Christ, and then themselves becoming productive and influential members of their own community. So that's a little bit about what we do as the message. Yeah.
Give us a little bit of the scope of the ministry, staffing wise, or how many programs.
Yeah.
However you describe it.
So in South Africa, in Cape Town, we're primarily focused on the city of Cape Town. We've got about 25 staff here in Cape Town, and we have three primary, we call them streams, project areas. The first we call our Prisons and Enterprise program, which is working with youth offenders, primarily in their pre-release and then their first 2 or 3 years outside of prison, really seeking to reintegrate them, rehabilitate them, and provide them with their first job opportunity. So we actually disciple ex-offenders into work and into an opportunity. We've got a micro business, coffee shops that we run across Cape Town that's employing guys who were previously incarcerated, and women, men and women. The second stream is our creative mission stream, and this is work seeking to really present the gospel to young people in accessible means to them. We use a lot of the creative arts within that. My wife herself is a singer. She's one of our artists, and we have others they get involved in schools. They're in the prisons, and again, making sure that everything we do has clear gospel proclamation alongside the social action, so to speak. And then the third arm, and this ties in, I think, with the sports component. The third we call our community transformation arm. And through this, we partner with local churches and develop long-term community-based interventions that are seeking to provide an alternative for young people who are being pulled into gang life or life of crime and so on. So we're involved in these community hubs that use both sports and arts, recreation as a medium to interact with young people and then develop them through the local church long term to really have an intervention that is more preventative. So we're working on both sides. I'll say we have that side where we're rehabilitative of guys who've been through prison and so on, but we've also got the preventative arm working with young people. And often it's actually the leaders of our community-based works are those that have come through our system. So they've got the tattoos, they've got the scars, but they're now giving back into the community in order to teach and develop young people.
They picked up the DNA, if you will, of who you are and how you go about it. And
exactly.
I think one of the things that you and your father and I connected on early on was that my background was also very urban. I was a street kid growing up, and it was tough. I was the minority in my community, and there's a lot that goes along with that. But there's a sense in which God uses all these things in our lives. And so I was also very involved in a ministry very similar to yours with the YMCA for many, many years, decades. And so this is one of the reasons why I resonate with what you're doing and so excited about what you're doing. But with your experience there, you use some of that to speak to a local church who's trying to reach that youth that you're talking about. What are the top 2, 3, 7, whatever bits of wisdom for how they could go about doing that?
Yeah, one of the critical, the paradigm that we would operate in is what we'd call a proximity principle, that our effectiveness is directly related to the proximity that we have to young people, to the community. As a church, our engagement needs to be close and where we're rubbing shoulders literally with those we're seeking to influence. And I think for me, that's been critical over the years that I've been involved in ministry here on African soil. The effectiveness is related to proximity and longevity. And those two things go hand. Yes, exactly. And I think that can obviously have many forms, but one of the things we've learned, the message in the UK, and we've done that here as well, is actually this relocation model, or this living in model that actually, a friend of mine said, one of the things we really need to be praying about is our address, and I think, sometimes I think it's a tough one. It's a tough call upon us, but we need to be asking: Are we living in such a way that is exposing people to the gospel consistently through our fellowship, through our proximity, through our hospitality, through all of those things? So I think that is for us the gateway to effective mission. When we've, one of the things I found, obviously, as someone who came into a context, I don't call myself a missionary anymore because I've lived in South Africa so long, but I kind of came in on that ticket. But again, my whole approach is to say, how do I mobilize the church and equip the church to most effectively engage unbelievers or rebellious youth, at-risk youth within their community? What are the tools? What are the resources? What are the relationships that I can connect a church with? So, I'm a great believer that the church is the hope of the world. It is, the church is the context within which Christ choose to bring transformation within a life and within a neighborhood and within a community. Someone like myself working in impoverished communities, part of what I'm seeking to do is build bridges of resources, build bridges of relationships that can then effectively empower the church that is in proximity within the community. Part of that is a theological language. You use the word incarnational, is churches in our context, particularly in urban contexts, that might be struggling, can soon fall into a survival mentality, or they're just trying to make it through and they've lost that missional edge. So part of what we're seeking to do is help them discover that missional edge, which is, I feel, about, moving away from one person centric leader to, again, this multiplicity, body ministry, equipping of the saints, who the resources, the assets, if you like, that are already within the context of a congregation. What gifts, talents, resources do they have that can help them become that outward life center, embracing of community that I think is a picture of the kingdom of God that we want to see break out in neighborhoods across this city. So, yeah, there's a whole lot of it there, Greg. Maybe you want to unpack some of that.
It's powerful. It's very powerful, and you're speaking our language. And those of you that are watching this, you'll see things coming up on the screen that'll help you rivet on some of these things. But Tim, we'll talk about in another podcast coming up here about some of the things that you're writing, some of the resources that you're producing. And I think you're aware of the fact that CSRM having its own publishing house, that you've already talked about 2 or 3 of the books that we have out there. The first one is Ecclesiology. What's our theology of the church? And you started already to talk about that. But also, what's the purpose of the church? And that is missiology. Let's go out and let's go make disciples, baptize and teaching them. And so you've already hit on a couple of hot topics for us, and this is why we love you and why we want to link arms with you, because we do think these things are important. Maybe I thought what you said just there was just absolutely spot on. And if we can get all of our individual congregations just to get on about being on mission, and that we're not just trying to make it through to the next sermon, but we're trying to get to the next person, and incarnationally being Christocentric in all that we're doing in that. I just think that's powerful. Can you give us an example of a church that's done that, or a particular person that has been reached in this way? Give us a testimony of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you about a guy called Unkaluli, MK, and I think this comes through. His story kind of embodies everything that we're seeking to accomplish. There's 3 words that I kind of, within everything we do as the message, there's 3 words that describe this process. The first word is identify, that we want to identify sometimes those who have a heart to respond to Christ, and provide them with and see them come to life through Jesus, and those. We want to identify people, particularly where others maybe don't see that potential. The second thing is we want to then provide a platform for them to flourish through discipleship, through equipping and resources and so on. And then thirdly, we want to see them on mission. So to help bring us back to MK's story, MK actually was identified while still in prison, became a believer, started a discipleship journey while in prison, but he was passionate about football, and that's soccer. That's why we formed a relationship with him, this passion for soccer. Once he came out of prison, connected to a local church, in Nyanga. Nyanga was the community where he grew up in. It was a Baptist church. And he started working with a guy called Pastor Quinelli in this community. And Quinelli himself, when we talk about proximity principle, Quinelli is living on the grounds of the church in this community that has a reputation of being the murder capital of Cape Town, a violent, gang-infested community. The church is right there, New Crossroads Baptist Church, at the heart of this community. MK came in, was discipled within this church, but felt that his calling and passion was to start a sports program within the local community. And he, off his own volition, started coaching young people on a daily basis, working with young people. And we were just, at one stage, we were just supporting him, giving him some soccer balls. He was he managed to get a job, was working a job, and then in the evenings working with these kids. And as we saw this begin to flourish, we sat down with the church and said, could we develop a combined initiative to help provide more structure? And so we developed what we called the Message Hub. And literally, we put a couple of classrooms now on this church site. And it's an after-school club for kids to come. And this has been going now 3, 4, 5 years. And football is the thing that's attracted them initially. They get great coaching, but then in the classrooms every day, they're able to do their homework. And then beyond that, they do other activities. And now Mkuluni has been facilitating this over a number of years and has actually transitioned the leadership of this work to a young man who came through the program himself, Kanti. And the beautiful thing about Kanti is Kanti's not like other young people in the neighborhood who just can't, either you get caught up in the gangs or you try and escape and get to the suburbs. That's the aspirations of most young people. Whereas Kanti is now, he's doing his degree in megatronics, and he said, I'm staying in this neighborhood. And my passion is that young people in this neighborhood all need to be able to pass physics and maths at school. But his motivation for that is his love for Jesus Christ, because he's felt called to live in proximity within this community. So again, you see this, this identify, platform, and mission lived out. My job is to support that, because these guys are just flourishing and able to do be way more effective than I could possibly be within that context.
And I'm sure you're doing well with that. But for those of you that have tuned into this is why you want to get in touch with Tim and get in touch with how you could be involved or even support this ongoing ministry. Tim, we're going to wrap this segment up right now, but that is a powerful testimony, and what you've been doing and what you've been networking, partnering, and envisioning and doing. We just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all those who are being reached. We're going to come back with Tim. And for those of you that are watching or listening to this, it may come out a week from now. So you have to wait. But Tim and I are going to get right back into it here in a couple of minutes. But we're going to hear a little bit more about the personal side of his life and what's happening. We're going to hear a little bit more about the resources that they produce. And we're going to try to help you who are doing that gospel-centric, evangelistic, disciple-making work in your local congregation. I'm going to try to help empower you to do that better, so you too can have this kind of story. Tim, thanks for joining us here.
Thanks, Greg.
The CSRM Podcast is a production of the Association of Church Sports and Recreation Ministers and their video production house, Overwhelming Victory Flix. Dr. Greg Linville is the executive producer, and Andrew Fouts is associate producer and editor. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. The CSRM Podcast is the flagship member of a new podcast network called Overwhelming Victory Radio. For more information on Overwhelming Victory Radio or to listen to our partner podcasts, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV Radio. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.